everybody. Welcome. So we're going to start letting people in, and at about 5 after we will get started. Just give everybody a few minutes to settle in. Got a great talk planned for you guys tonight, and multiple members of our team here who I will introduce you to in just a second. In just a few minutes as well, we'll turn our chat on so that everybody can engage in conversation with each other, ask questions. We have multiple members of our team here to help answer questions. You'll be able to ask private questions. We'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second as well. But it's just a few more minutes to get everybody in. We should be able to play music.
It's a good idea.
What do you think, Rebecca? 2 more minutes, a minute or two?
Let's go ahead.
Okay. All right, we're gonna get going. Welcome everybody. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. I'm gonna share my screen here. I'm Meredith Brower. I'm one of the Kind Body physicians. I practice out of the Santa Monica office. I'm one of the reproductive endocrinology specialists here. And I'm going to introduce you to multiple members of our team. First, I have Judith. Wave, Judith. There's Judith.
Hi, everybody.
She's one of our wonderful therapists who works with us here at Kind Body. I have Rebecca. There's Rebecca there. She's here. She's actually logged in as Kind Body, and she'll be helping to manage the chat. So the chat, I don't know if it's on, but if it's not on, it'll be open soon. So anything you want to say while we're talking, please put it in the chat. You can put it there publicly for everybody to see. You can chat Kind Body privately and reach Rebecca privately as well. And then throughout, we're going to be sort of addressing anything that you guys feel like you want us to address or questions that you may have. So please feel free to continue engaging. We have Emmy here and Tracy as well, both members of our Kind Body team who will be helping to make sure we get to as many of your questions as possible in the chat. So, tonight, so first of all, Kind Body, we are a medical practice. We offer full spectrum fertility care, and we try our best to do it in sort of a holistic way. We have people like Judith on our team who are therapists, with nutritionists on our team, and we are trying to provide like the whole spectrum of care to treat people in a sort of an integrated, holistic way. And mental health and emotional health is a huge part of fertility care, and so we're going to talk about that today. But I think we all wanted in this moment to just pause to talk about emotional health in general. We've talked a lot about it in the last couple of weeks as it pertains to fertility treatments or having to wait to start fertility treatments. There was a moment where we were doing that, but we kind of recognize that the psyche of the world is a bit distressed at this moment given what's going on. So we have Judith here who's going to spend some time talking about all of these issues and sort of mental health and emotional well-being at this moment in time. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Judith.
Thank you so much, Meredith. I'm really happy to be here with all of you today. Like Meredith said, I think that our wellness and mental health has never been more crucial right now, because everyone is grappling with a whole new world. And I think it really helps for all of us to kind of be here together, feeling like we're trying to brainstorm and figuring out how to deal with our new world. So we really want you to ask questions, make comments, participate. And, we have Rebecca and Tracy are going to look at your comments and add them to what we're talking about. So please feel free to weigh in. We're in a really tough spot right now, and some people are waking up every morning worried that they're going to get sick, or that a family member is going to get sick, or someone is sick. And there's so much anxiety around our health. And it really takes a toll on our mental health. Some people are not taking it seriously at all, and others are so vigilant that they're becoming obsessive about it. So people are talking about a wide range of emotions now, and what we're going to do is just talk about some common themes that I'm hearing, and then some tips to deal with it. So one of the biggest themes that everyone is talking about is isolation and loneliness, not surprising. For introverts, people are telling me that it's kind of nice to have this space in their lives to just be without having to constantly communicate. So it can be almost a relief. But if you're a more extroverted person and you miss all of the interaction, it's like torture. Because as human beings, we're not meant to live this way. We're very social beings. So it's really important to recognize that. And if you are someone who craves personal connection, and you're doing all of your interaction on Zoom, we're glad that we have it, but it is not the same. You don't get the same warmth and touch and body language over Zoom than you get when you're in person. And if you're single and this is a time that you've been really looking for a life partner, being on hold is really tough. And even though I'm hearing a lot of really interesting Zoom dating experiences, it's not the optimal time to be meeting a life partner. So we're all reinventing our life right now and trying to figure it out from the ground up. The other thing, yes.
No, sorry, I was going to comment on that Zoom. There was actually an interesting article. I don't know. I think it might even have been in the New York Times last week about the impact of these Zoom interactions and how different they truly are from an actual person-to-person interaction. And though it's almost like an empty craving, you like crave it and then you do it and then it leaves you feeling empty. And they were talking about just not the lag, sort of the lag between the actual expression and the real expression. There were all these various reasons that they were just sort of in a very scientific way showing that it doesn't really fill that void for interpersonal interaction.
I'm gonna look for that. I missed that, but
yeah,
I think we all experience that constantly. And sometimes we're not synced up, so there's a longer lag time than others. Mm-hmm. And people are not, we don't have the same cues on when we can talk and when we come back. So it's a very different interpersonal experience.
Yeah,
it definitely is. The other thing is that people's sense of time is totally skewed. We're having this sort of flat line without the ebbs and flows that we're used to. And it's totally throwing us off. I mean, right before we came on, I think Tracy was saying that April felt like it was a year long, because we don't have holidays to look forward to, and weddings, and even weekends when we used to meet people for brunch. We don't have the same touchstones that we're used to. So we're trying to figure out how to create those ebbs and flows in an impossible situation. You know, right now, I think going to the grocery store is like a big event, and that's the excitement for the week. But I think that we can try to create a new kind of ebb and flow. You can find new connections. You can plan things like this, like, you know, participating in online forums. You can get, you can have a regular Zoom experience with someone every week, but I think it's important to think about how you can create that ebb and flow. Some people have talked to me about getting really involved in TV characters. So even though we might have all watched, you know, our Netflix shows and binge watched them, sometimes like a character really touches you in a certain way and you feel like they're your friend. And you can, you know, I think it's okay to use that as part of your weekly connection. And if you're really feeling so isolated that you don't have any connections and the loneliness is really getting to you and creating depression, it's important to, you know, seek a therapist and find someone that you can really talk to about it. You don't want to get yourself into a deep rabbit hole. The other thing is fear of the future and fear of the unknown.
Wait, I'm going to pause right there.
Yeah.
I want to just sort of take it topically. So let's focusing on this isolation and loneliness and sort of the coping mechanisms there. And then we'll sort of go topic by topic. I think the other thing at this point, you know, depending on where you live, of course, it's all based on your geography, but I think that most people generally agree that it is okay to see people face to face as long as you are taking all the sort of routine precautions. So especially for adults who can appropriately social distance, I do think that, you know, I mean, I went on a walk in my neighborhood the other day and there were outside people's homes. People were on one side of the yard and then the other side of the yard actually speaking with each other and wearing masks, and everybody's outside. So I think it's fair to say that most people agree that outside,
yeah,
appropriately social distancing, and, you know, wearing masks, that the transmission, the risk for transmission should be exceedingly low. So I think that's probably also another way,
important,
you know, as our stay-at-home orders are slowly starting, the restrictions are slowly starting to ease up. I think that's probably also an appropriate way to connect with people, to just have, and I think it does feel different to sit across from a friend and see them in person and actually be able to just have a conversation in person. So I think that, you know, if you have some underlying health condition, maybe, but even still, I think everyone agrees that's a fairly safe way to connect right now. So
yeah, I think getting outside, I mean, our weather has finally gotten better on the East Coast. We had a very wet, cold spring, but it's finally to a point where we can get out. It's been beautiful, and I think that's crucial for the connection to people, but also for just what the being outside does in nature and looking around and you know, sort of absorbing the outside world.
Yeah. And so then I think you had started to talk about the disorientation. I think we sort of jumped from one topic to the other. So maybe we could talk about, and you were sort of the coping mechanisms for sort of reorienting ourselves, or sort of, or marking time in a certain way.
Right. I mean, like I said, to create benchmarks to look forward to, you know, even if it's like a walk in the park, a socially distant walk in the park with a friend or family. And creating a new rhythm, you know, and making the week different than the weekend. I think those are all really important.
Yeah, I think, one thing in our family, we started on Friday night sort of having a fire. We just like every Friday night since the quarantine started, we're having a fire, we're sitting outside by the fire, and it just, like you said, just okay, today is Friday, you know, like it, I think that
I love that.
just creating a day, and it can be anything that works for you. But this is something I do that I enjoy, and it happens on this day of the week. Doing that kind of stuff to mark time, I think is helpful. Kind of
So helpful. I mean, I think that rituals in general are so important in our life, and so many of the rituals that we're used to aren't available. So creating new ones like that, I love that idea,
Yeah.
sitting outside by the fire.
Yeah, it's been great. All right, and then I think I didn't mean to interrupt, you were just starting to
No.
talk about
So we were just talking about fear of the future. Yeah, that our brains are wired to react with fear when we face uncertainty, because that's part of the survival mechanism, the fight or flight response. And we think that we have some control over our lives. We used to, because even though we don't, most of the time bad things don't happen, and so we don't really need to worry every minute of the day. But now it's kind of pulled the rug out from under us, and we don't know what to expect, and we don't know how to predict what's going to happen. So people are reporting a huge level of anxiety because we don't have the illusion of control, and it's scary. And one of the things that people talk about, and it's kind of a cliche, but we only have the present. It's the only thing we know for sure. And some people are very focused on the past. Some people are very focused on the future. But I think right now, we should all practice being in the present. Like even right now, we're all together. We're all going through this at the same time. And I think it's really nice to breathe with that and to really think about it. And after this is all over and we resume some semblance of normal life, it's something to come back to, is really living in the present. Yeah. So let's see. I just want to talk a little bit about relationship anxiety.
Can I ask you a question, Judith? And do you have any, this is obviously, do you have any tips for people? I mean, this is obviously a really hard thing to do. I think, especially like as you feel your anxiety level increasing, I think it becomes increasingly more challenging to stay present in the future. Do you have any tips for people on how they might sort of practically do that?
I mean, I think it's so individual. I think that for some people, it's yoga. For some people, it's breathing. For some people, it's having interpersonal reactions. It's going for a walk. Some people need medication because it gets out of control and there's no way to control it. I think you have to be really careful to get enough sleep, because sleep deprivation exacerbates anxiety. And I think the same with diet. We're all sitting at home baking bread. At least that's what many people are doing. And, I think that we have to find new ways to really take care of ourselves nutritionally. And there are all kinds of other techniques that you can go online. There are learning new breathing techniques. There's tapping. There's something called tapping. And usually you would do it in person with a therapist, but you can actually learn how to do it online. So those are some ideas, but it's not easy. It's not easy. And the other thing is, distraction is a great tool to use. So if if it's reading, if it's listening to a podcast, watching a show, taking your mind off of what's worrying you is really important. And even though the distractions aren't as available to us now as they were before, there are still distractions that you can do at home.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
So we're all kind of, stuck with the same people now. We're not interacting with the range of people that we're used to. And even though many people are doing well with that, Not everyone is. And a lot of people are talking to me about not having any privacy, not having any time for themselves, and just feeling overwhelmed by the pressure of just being with one or two people. So I think that there are a few things to think about when you're dealing with conflict with a relationship, whether it's a partner or a friend, if you have a roommate. If you're really feeling that there is tension building up and it's not getting resolved, it's really important to stop and talk about it and not let it get to a point where it's going to combust. So if you are upset about something, stop and try and deal with it now. And it gives you a chance to really focus on that one thing, because if you wait too long, you start to criticize the person and not the behavior. It's like, you don't care about me because you don't wash the dishes in time. Instead of just talking about, we're here together, you don't wash your lunch dishes, it piles up, there's ants. I'm just making up scenarios. I think it's really important. The other thing is that people are very conflicted about their quarantine behavior. So some people are vigilant about wiping down every counter constantly and doorknobs and hand washing and never going out, and they're completely obsessive about it. And other people are kind of nonchalant and just, they're doing what they have to do, but they're not obsessing over it. And people are talking about how difficult it is to manage that. So that's one of those things that you want to explain to the person why it's hard for you. Why it's hard for you that they don't wipe the counters when they come home. Instead of just yelling at them or criticizing them or reminding them, is to explain to them why it's hard. And again, don't globalize it to the whole person. Really focus on the behavior. And then once you talk about it, do something to de-stress. Do something to have fun, to laugh, and to let it go. But it's really difficult to live with one person. And I think it's important also to find private time. I have people who are talking to me in the bathroom and in closets, and looking, because in Manhattan, people are living in very small spaces. So you look for whatever you can to find that space. So does anybody have any comments or questions or input, or anybody want to weigh in?
I'm going to chime in and just voice some of the questions I'm seeing in the chat. There are some questions about literally how to deal with the physical anxiety and not in the stomach feeling that a lot of people are having right now.
The physical, how to deal with the physical anxiety?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I know we hold in our body all of our emotions. Some people have it in their neck, some people have it, in their shoulders, but many people feel it in their stomachs. And I think that's a lot of research has shown that's where meditation and breathing really helps. I think that people hear it all the time, and those people for whom it works swear by it, and it's not for everybody, but I do think it really makes a difference. And also diet. I think nutrition really makes a difference too. Looking at what you're eating and when you're eating it and how it affects you is really important.
I think. Oh,
go ahead.
I think it's interesting that people are expressing, because I think, everybody, we all have this sense that This is a very stressful time, but to go back to the sense of isolation, it's hard to know how stressed other people are, right? Because we're all just sitting home alone, and it feels like you are the only person experiencing it. And now we have a bunch of people in a room saying that they're feeling like their anxiety levels are high enough that there's actually somatic symptoms associated with them. And we actually had somebody in the office, a staff member in our office this week, out with that. We've been back in the office, and things look different in the office. We're wearing these masks that we can't breathe out of all day long and trying not to come near each other. And it's very stressful. We actually had somebody in the office out all week with probably some somatic symptoms. So I think it's very real. I think it's very universal. And I think it's really hard to deal with. But, in regards to this idea of mindfulness, I'm not an expert certainly, but over the last couple months, as we've been talking to a lot of people through these types of forums, and we've had people on our forums talking about mindfulness, I think, but one of the questions that comes up over and over again is, well, how do I even do that? Like, I hear that word all the time. What does it mean? How do I start mindfulness? And
there's a lot of really great apps.
Mm-hmm.
Calm is one, Headspace. There's a lot of great apps that really help you get started.
Yeah, exactly. I think those, and they do, like, they give you some basic, like there's a course, like, through your app, there's an actual course that introduces you to what those concepts of mindfulness are, and then how to use it, how to practice it. Because again, it's a word that people throw around, but as far as actually doing it, I think that you said, like, sort of that those apps can introduce you to those things. John Kabat-Zinn, he's sort of the father of mindfulness-based stress reduction. He has a book, Mindfulness for Beginners, and there's a CD that comes with that book that has some basic guided meditations to start with. So there are a lot of resources out there for that. I know in LA we have something called Inside LA, which is this great little institution in Santa Monica where all that used to have in-person meditation classes, but now everything's virtually. And then there's a whole community around that. So and it's virtual, so I guess anyone can use it. So I would imagine that any community that you are in has resources for those types of things. And I think that is often helpful. And then, like you said, Judith, right, like seeing a therapist, right? Like, do you think most of your colleagues are seeing people virtually now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone. I mean, the thing is that, if you don't have an outlet for your feelings and your emotions and all of the rumination, you're gonna hold it in those places in your body. You need an outlet for it. And so I think looking for that person that you feel comfortable with can make a huge difference in your somatic reactions to things.
Yeah. Great.
The other thing I wanted to mention is, finding fun moments, trying to be creative about how you can have fun now. And actually, Rebecca had talked to me about something that her family did that I just thought was so great. I want to try it myself. So Rebecca, maybe you can talk about what you did.
Yeah, and part of the reason we love doing these virtual events is because the chat becomes its own forum. So we love when people leave tips or things that they've done and have worked for them in the chat. So please keep doing that. My family did a cooking night where we all agreed on one recipe, ordered the ingredients a few days in advance, and we had a Zoom up and just cooked the same meal together at the same time, and then we ate it together. And we it was really nice, and it was an activity, which is, I think, a lot better than just sitting around and talking about what we're doing, which is not much right now. And then I see someone in the chat did something similar with a movie. They all picked the same movie and watched it at the same time, which is really cool. So I think finding interesting, unique ways to stay connected and give yourself something to think about into is really nice.
Yeah.
Those are great suggestions. And I think we can all get creative and find ways. I heard of a jazz band that got together and played their music virtually, and I think there are all kinds of ways to do it, and we can think outside the box to make fun for ourselves.
Yeah. I also want to just touch upon something that you mentioned, just this discrepancy in people's feelings about how to social distance or be isolated. And I think I haven't heard, you mentioned it tonight, I haven't heard people talking a lot about it, but, you know, certainly I think anybody here probably has people that they know where, you know, I have friends who literally haven't left their homes for 10 weeks. They have not walked down the street for 10 weeks. And I know my next door neighbor has parties every Friday night because I hear them. So, you know, there's this huge, discrepancy, and I think it can cause conflict within friendships, right? So if one friend has one expectation, another one has another expectation, or within partners, like one partner feels like it's okay to order in meals and one of them doesn't, you know, there this sort of discrepancy in how, because that's right, that's one of the hardest parts about this phase two, as you call it. What are the rules, like, and they're not so clear, and people having different understandings about what the rules should be. I think that can be really anxiety provoking. Do you have any other thoughts on like how people can address that? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really big issue because, you know, it's not only yourself. You might be willing to take a risk. You know, people have different tolerances for risk. You know, so one person might take a risk. You know, I'm going to go hang out, being at risk too, which they could be. And so I think that's one of the reasons it's so difficult, is because the behavior is not only impacting you, it's impacting other people around you. And that's a very different feeling than I think anything we've experienced before. So I think that's why it's so important to explain to the people that you're living with what your concerns are, so that they try to understand how important it is, rather than just announcing, don't do that, and then there has to be some compromise. You know, there just has to be some compromise, you know, that's maybe not totally comfortable for either partner, or either however many people you're living with. But this is the world we're living in right now.
Yeah. And again, like I said, I think the rules are so unclear, and it's hard to measure the risk. So everybody's trying to make these decisions. Right. And like you said,
right.
Sure. And really anything short of not leaving your home has some risk, but what is that risk? It's hard to quantify actually what that risk is. And then the other thing too that I think is starting to really sink in for everybody is that this is not a short-term problem, right? So I think there was a sense when we all went into our homes, however, 9 weeks ago, like, okay, if everyone just goes in our homes and this will be over. But as we learn more and more, we're sort of realizing that this is a long-term problem. This is, you know, it's not like you're going to stay in your house for another week. At some point, if you want to leave your home, which I think most people probably will or have to or will want to, what is the risk? How big is the risk? You know, and nobody really knows that. And I think that's probably contributing to the anxiety too, right?
And I think one of the things that's happening now is that, you know, as the dust has settled, and it's been 9 or 10 weeks since we've been here, on some level we're adjusting. You know, as human beings, we are capable of adaptation. So we're kind of adapting to this and making new rules for ourselves, but there's still such a huge unknown, because we don't, like you said, we don't really know what the risks are.
Yeah.
And so I think we're kind of making it up as we go along.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Thank you. Let's see. Oh, this topic here.
Yeah. So, so many people have lost their jobs, or been furloughed, or are, you know, had their salaries reduced, or, you know, all kinds of job stress. And there is a huge amount of anxiety around work and money. It's terrifying. And it's, you know, it's impossible to convince yourself not to worry and to, you know, just feel like, oh, it'll be fine, because it may not be fine. It is objectively nerve-wracking. But, you know, if you get yourself overly concern and ruminate constantly about it, you're going to cut off your brain's ability to brainstorm. And one of the things you want to think about is solutions. So I think if you give yourself permission to take a break from the worry, anxiety, and just think about, what can I do? And it may mean reinventing yourself. It may mean reaching out to someone for help. It may mean learning something new, you know, and it also may mean doing networking and things that you're uncomfortable with. But thinking and brainstorming is going to be part of the process. The other thing is that new resources are becoming available all the time. So you may have looked to see if there are resources for somebody in your position and couldn't find anything. Plus, I know the unemployment offices are a disaster and people are having a terrible time even getting the resources that they're entitled to. But if you keep looking and keep trying, sometimes new opportunities or new possibilities pop up that you didn't know about. And the other thing is to just know that you're not alone, because so many people are in this boat, and there are all kinds of online forums that people are talking to me about for job hunters, for people who, for food banks, and for, you know, just mental health resources that exist now. But this is a tough one.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
We had somebody come on early on in one of our retreats and talk about finances. And one of the suggestions she had is, you know, there are a lot of people willing to work with you if you're in a financially difficult place. And one of their recommendations was to be proactive about reaching out to them. If it's a credit card bill or rent or a mortgage or a utility, just don't wait to get it. What she had recommended, this financial advisor, was to call them and explain your situation and see if they're willing to work with you on, you know, postponing payments of various things. So I think just sort of not sitting back and waiting for the bills to pile up, but proactively reaching out and explaining situation. That was one of her tips that I hadn't thought of, that I thought was a really, really good advice.
Yeah, I mean, I think having concrete action items can help with the anxiety, because if you just get yourself consumed with worry, you can't take action. So even just listing all the things that you can do, you know, like calling the credit cards or calling your landlord or whoever it is, you know, it feels like you're doing something.
Yeah. Rebecca, do you want to do, I think, oh no, here were coping mechanisms. I think I went over those.
Yeah.
Do you want to do a couple more questions before we?
We are actually getting, we're about to talk about this, but we are getting some questions about fertility and anxiety around age and fertility, you know, particularly with what's happening right now and how to cope with that.
That's
so I know you're
yeah, so many people have been on hold, you know, and just sitting with this waiting. It's not easy.
Yeah. I think, like you said, Rebecca, we're sort of in a transition, but when I was reading through Judith's slides and what she was planning to talk about, right here was sort of listed are sort of her 4 things that, and she wasn't talking about fertility. I mean, she wasn't talking about fertility in general. She was just listing emotional experiences that she notices people having in this new environment. And I looked at them and I thought, oh, well, that's interesting, because those are actually things that fertility patients are already experiencing. Like those are such common emotional themes in patients undergoing fertility treatments or dealing with infertility, that it's sort of adding insult to injury, right? So isolation, fear of the unknown, fear of what, you know, your outcomes are in treatments, anxiety about these very expensive treatments, and certainly tension in relationships. I mean, if I had to list the 4 most common things that I see my patients struggling with, they're right there. So here you go. You have people that are already very familiar, whether they're processing it or not, that they're experiencing these things. So certainly almost all of them are. And now you're existing in a world where now everybody's experiencing. I think it sort of compounds the intensity of the experience, to be experiencing infertility in this really strange, uncertain time. And I think it is a particularly difficult time for people to be trying to get pregnant. And then, on top of that, so on top of sort of an exacerbation of these already very stressful experience, this very stressful experience, and these sort of emotional uncertainties, people are also now having, most people I think are pretty clear, if they've been trying to get pregnant, that they still want to continue trying to get pregnant, especially knowing that this environment is not changing anytime soon. So now on top of that, they have to think about, well, what does it mean for me to be pregnant right now, right? What is it, if I do get pregnant, which is definitely what I want to do because I've been trying to do it for a really long time, now there's this whole other level of uncertainty and risk in being pregnant, right? And so I think I have had a lot of people who are just feeling nervous or second guessing if this is the time. I've had people come in to preserve fertility with partners instead of actually trying to get pregnant right now because the uncertainty is too much. It feels scary to be pregnant in a time like this. And I understand that. I mean, the very first thing they have to do when they walk in the door is sign a waiver that says they understand that there is some risk to being pregnant and that there is some risk to having COVID. And we don't know a whole lot about COVID and pregnancy and what the impact is. And, if you go to the CDC's website or everyone will sort of tell you the same thing, that there's very limited data. We don't think you're more likely to get it, but you could be more likely to be sick. And then you might open up the New York Times and see pictures of the woman who had to be delivered at 34 weeks because she had COVID and it was, compressing her lungs and her lung function. So, that could certainly send anybody into a tailspin. So there's this whole other extra element that comes from thinking about being pregnant at that time. What does it mean to have a prenatal appointment? Your husband or your partner or your wife may not be able to go to your prenatal appointment with you. So what does prenatal care look like right now? Will my partner be allowed in the delivery room? Because if you delivered 2 weeks ago, they weren't going to be allowed in the delivery room. And if you deliver tomorrow, they probably, or in the postpartum area, if you deliver next week, your partner will be able to be with you in postpartum. But in the fall, in the winter, will your partner be with you? And we don't know those things. So I think that even though it's what people want and they know that time is of the essence and they often aren't delaying, they're accepting this whole other level of, uncertainty and risk that is very, very unsettling. So, I mean, I don't have any incredibly wise things to say about that, except that acknowledging that it's real and it's there, and engaging the coping mechanisms that we've already been talking about. Unless you have anything further to say, Judith.
No, I mean, I think it's something that I hear from so many people. I do talk to a lot of people who are pregnant right now, and everyone is doing fine. But it's a worry. Mm-hmm. It's a worry.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it is. It's scary. And we are, our clinics are open. I think pretty much every fertility clinic that I know of is open again, and people are resuming treatment. And certainly the clinics all look very different. Yeah. But I think our patients are getting used to that, and they're not allowed in the front door without being screened, and everybody's wearing a mask all the time, and you have to stay in the room until
very reassured.
Yeah, I guess so. You have to stay in the room until someone invites you to come out of the room so that they know the hallway is clear and those types of things. So I think that, but then also there's this, I have this, there's a fear of people who are feeling like they really want to completely isolate and take on zero risk are now even have to accept some risk just to come to the clinic in general. And I know some patients that are having a hard time with that, even though we are certainly keeping everything as safe as we possibly can. So there's a lot more. I mean, as if it wasn't hard enough already, this really, I feel like makes it twice as hard. But then, as you said, Rebecca, people are saying, well, like, I'm older. And so I think I kind of agree, if you're older, I don't recommend waiting 18 months to get pregnant. Maybe you could do some form of fertility preservation and that's different. But, most people still, if they've been trying for a long time, aren't really wanting to postpone all this until we're all vaccinated and have herd immunity. So I think that it's hard, definitely hard.
And what would you recommend for anyone who's single right now and is worried about their age increasing?
I think, I think it's actually right. A lot of my single patients are saying, like, dating is hard. Like, people aren't dating, right? We're social distancing. We're not dating. Like, we've been told to stay away from people. So, I think that the idea of finding a partner right now, there's like less optimism in that. And so I think anybody, the conversation around fertility preservation is particularly relevant. And we're definitely seeing a lot more of that. And I think it's good if it's on your mind to at least have a conversation about it and understand where you're at, both physically, where you're at emotionally, financially, and at least get the information to make yourself feel better. Because I do think a lot of times in a fertility preservation assessment, we say, hey, as soon as you find that right person, you should still try. But I think a lot of people are feeling like, well, that's going to be further down the line now, because like I said, I think dating has been largely put on hold, or are certainly much more challenging, as if that wasn't challenging enough, at least in LA already. So, yeah. And I'm gonna go support your emotional health. So I think we've touched on a lot of this stuff already. Strengthening, I actually got these. We did an event last week with patients who had their own fertility journeys, and I have to say, I kind of found them to be so insightful, and they all had these really incredible suggestions on things that they did during their journey. So I'm giving them credit. I stole a lot of this from them. But I do think that strengthening your support network is just essential. And everybody's support network may look different. And for some people, maybe that's just their partner and their friends. And for other people, it's going to take a village, a therapist, acupuncturist. A lot of our acupuncturists, most of our acupuncturists here in LA are open again and seeing patients. And I think a really good acupuncturist does often become an important part of the support network. They offer, they're talking and cheering people on, and in addition to supporting in their health, we talked about mindfulness and meditation, and then support groups. Like in that chat last week where we had patients, I think that people were in the chat sort of even pairing off and finding ways to connect with each other on their own. So finding other forums to connect with people who are experiencing what you're experiencing, I think is very, very powerful. The second one, you mentioned this previously, Judith, to be kind to yourself. And I think that there's so many reasons to be hard on yourself. I hear it for everybody right now, hard on yourself because you're feeling anxious and you wish you weren't feeling so anxious. Hard on yourself because you feel too anxious to go outside, and that your friend, they're going outside and they're doing better than you because they're going outside, but you're too anxious to go outside. So there's a million things to be hard on yourself about. My peers are, failing at teaching their kids, or, there's so many things to be hard on yourself for. But these women, especially last week, had done such a good job with these sort of like positive affirmations. And I think that just cut yourself some slack, I think is really especially important right now. And, just if you get out of bed and do something, if you get out of bed and brush your teeth and put some clothes on and pat yourself on the back sometimes, instead of, kind of giving yourself more negativity. Rebecca, can you think those women last week had these amazing sort of things that they were saying? I'm trying to bring those into the conversation, but one of them was journaling, right? She was journaling and not only journaling about how she was feeling, but the things that she wanted to believe that maybe her heart wasn't there. She kind of write them over and over again. Again, just positive affirmations, and she would write them, and then she would say them. She said she would say them before she went to bed at night. She would say those positive affirmations again, and I think it can help even create some rewiring, like a positivity rewiring, or that's what she was describing, and I thought that was really cool.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Again, this is sort of take one day at a time. I think if you look, and this is hard to do, but if you look too far into the future, because that future is just so uncertain, it's very, very overwhelming. So you kind of just looking at the day that's in front of you is important as well. I think that's all we have. I think Judith put this great group of resources together for us, which we appreciate. And then Rebecca, are there any more questions that you sort of see coming up?
We're getting some questions about egg freezing specifically and pricing and everything for that. We are offering on the next slide, actually, a special offer if you wanted to book a therapy appointment with Judith or a fertility consultation at 50% off. And then we can offer cycle discounts as well. So we'll email out all that information. And then I know Judith is going to tell her story. So she recently recovered from COVID-19 and wrote a really beautiful blog piece on our blog. And I'm excited for her to just share her journey. Some of the questions we got, Judith, so you know, were how to handle your emotions if a loved one or someone you know has it. So maybe when you tell your story, you can speak to like what helped you from your friends and your support system as well.
Yeah, Kind Body asked me to write up my story of my struggle with COVID-19, which was a real challenge. And I think one of the things I learned is that it's a really big deal. Not for everybody. My husband had it first, and he had a very mild case of it, and it sort of came and went, and it was fine. And I tried to stay away, but I did get it, and I just assumed I'm a really healthy person. I don't have any underlying medical conditions, so it'll be the same. And I think the problem with this virus is that there's no way to predict who's going to have a serious case and who's going to have an easy case, because I don't think there was any reason why mine should have been so much worse than his, but it was. And so I had 18 days of spiked fevers up to 103, and just really, really terrible body aches. I ended up with pneumonia, and I narrowly managed to escape being in the hospital. But it was just debilitating. It was incredibly depressing. It was very scary. And I had to use every single solitary ounce of knowledge and hope that I could muster. So what I would say is, if you know someone who has it, or you get it yourself, the first thing to do is really use your support system. It's like Meredith was saying, your social network, and it doesn't have to be 1 million people, but that really kept me going. And if you know somebody who has it, reach out to them, text them, send them food. Do whatever you can to support them, even if you don't know them very well. As I was trying to keep it kind of a secret, because I got a very early case of it, and everyone kind of blamed us for getting it. Like, we weren't careful enough. Where did you get it? Because I'm going to do something different, so I would never get it. And I have no idea how we got it. I mean, I got it from my husband, but I don't know where he got it. We were being very careful. I don't know. So there was a certain amount of shame. And so I really wasn't telling anybody, but at some point it just became impossible because I was so sick. And once people found out, I can't tell you how much support I received from people that kept me going. And I used the resources that I had in the medical community to advise me, and I also had really good medical care. And I know that not everybody has access to that, and so I was always aware that that was really fortunate. The other thing is, it's a lot of the things that we talked about today. I use distraction to distract me from the incredible discomfort. And my way of being distracted is to watch animal videos. So people were sending me all kinds of animal videos. I found them, I mean, any animal except reptiles. So that was really helpful to me. And I also, in the article, talk about, I really wanted to find a peer group of people who had ideas on how to deal with this, but it was so early that I didn't know anyone else who had it. But I ended up going through this at the exact same time that Chris Cuomo did, and he was announcing all of his symptoms and all of his process on CNN every night. So that was my sort of touchstone point every night, and he was my peer support, even though I don't know him and he doesn't know me. But it worked. It really helped. And then the other thing is, just trying to use all of the mindfulness skills that you've ever had or thought about. I really did. I really kind of harnessed all of the resources I could find to get through it. So after 18 days, the fever finally left, and it's been a long road to recovery, and that was the other thing I didn't expect. But in this time, I actually did find an online forum that has been really helpful. And for people who had serious cases, the recovery is much longer than anyone expects. But I'm happy to report that I'm feeling very good now. And I'm really glad to be here with all of you tonight. And thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you for sharing it. We're so glad you're feeling better. Yeah, I know it's
so much.
Yeah. I think that sense of shame is so interesting, because like it's perceived, right? I mean, I think that most people really just want to support anybody who is suffering, but I think that, like you said, that automatically you'll sort of think that somebody thinks you asked for it, or you misbehaved.
I misbehaved.
Yeah, you did. You obviously went and touched every surface that you could, and then rubbed your hands in your face or something like that. Know, which obviously you didn't do. But there's this feeling that that somehow if you had just done what you were supposed to do, you wouldn't get it.
I caused it.
Right. And that's not the case. And I think, especially moving forward, as we're not all just going to stay at home for a year and a half. Like everyone's going to be accepting some level of risk. And then there may be people who get it. So I just think that that's an interesting thing. And just, recognizing that people really do want to support you, especially the people who love you. So just accepting that, embracing for it, and asking for it right away, and sort of recognizing you feel the shame, and then just, again, being kind. This is not my fault. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. And sort of trying to let go of that shame, because it seems like a counterintuitive thing to feel, but I can totally imagine how you might feel that way.
I think that, it's the same thing with fertility. There's a lot of shame and any kind of illness. I think that we are just not accepting enough of all the differences for all of us.
Right. I know. And often we ourselves are our hardest critics, right? We're the ones placing all the judgment on ourselves. And if we're just strong enough to tell everybody that we're suffering, people are there to support you. They just don't even know that you're suffering, or even how to support you unless you ask for it. Like you said, whether you're sick with COVID, or struggling with infertility, or struggling with the decision to preserve fertility, just asking for, recognizing you need some help, and then putting it out there for people to give it to you. It's so important. Yeah.
Well, thank you both. If there's anything else that you want Dr. Brower or Judith to address, let us know in the chat. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up in just a couple minutes. I do think coming together like this is really nice, and it's what has helped me the most throughout all of this. I think it's very normal to wake up every day feeling incredibly anxious and uneasy, and anything we can do to establish some sort of rhythm and connection and have something to look forward to, even if it's just this group Zoom chat, really makes a big difference. So thank you both for talking, and thank you everyone in the chat for being awesome and sharing your hair tips and tricks and all the things you're doing now. It's great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
To be with all of you tonight, and please reach out for any reason.
Yeah.
And we definitely be doing more of these Zoom sessions. I think we all personally, as a team, love doing them and miss them when we don't. So we'll be doing them really regularly. And we'll send out an email follow-up with the slides and the video in case you want to reference it again, and just stay tuned because we're going to be doing a lot of these events and community activities because we love connecting with all of you. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.